out, bag it up.
Hi everyone, I'm Ken Verderami, and welcome to another edition of the Ultimate Steel Shooter, where we talk about all things and only things Steel Challenge. Okay, everybody, welcome back to the podcast as always, and again, thanks for listening. Before we jump into today's topic, which is actually comes from one of my listeners who sent me a question, I want to give a kind of a short update on my new book that was out. So, as I'm sure most people are familiar with, a couple of weeks ago, I finally published the second edition of my book, Do You Feel the Need for Speed? And of course, that book is called Do You Still Feel the Need for Speed? And if you're not familiar with it, it's an updated version. It's got over 40 new pages of material, both new chapters and updated material in some of the old chapters, and then some new additional drills as well. Of course, you can check that out on Amazon Books. Excuse me. So, one of my listeners who purchased the book let me know a few days ago that he had noticed a bunch of editorial, grammatical kind of errors, and then he also one or two things that between different sections of the book didn't line up with each other. He pointed those out to me, so I pulled back out the manuscript. I thought we had basically caught all those. Sure enough, I did find a bunch more, so we went and corrected those, and then put out a new manuscript to Amazon to update the book. So if you were to go to buy the book today, I think you'd actually probably see it's on hold for the time being while they review the new manuscript. So probably they're usually pretty good about it. Within 24 to 48 hours, they'll get it through their process, and the book will be available for purchase again. So thanks to that listener for pointing that stuff out. I mean, I know some people don't care about, grammatical mistakes every now and others it's more important to them. But for me, as someone, as an author, it's kind of important to put out the best professional product that I can, since people are obviously spending their hard-earned money on that book, and making those kind of corrections is important. So we went in and updated the manuscript. All right, enough about that. So this, as I mentioned, is a question from a listener, and he had asked, basically said, hey, what do you do how do you handle when a training session goes really bad? I guess he had a session or so, he went out there and nothing seemed to be working, and kind of getting frustrated, and he was wondering, is there something specific you should be doing? And so, interesting topic. I don't think I've ever really talked about it at length, but it is an important concept as part of your training that you need to take into consideration, that will go a long way to being a lot more efficient and therefore effective in your training. And so basically it kind of comes down to what kind of issues you are having in a training session, as for what methodology you would use to go and address those. So number one, if you're having just what I would call the normal issues or problems or mistakes of the training session, I don't necessarily think you should do anything different, right? The whole purpose of training is to identify issues with your technique and correct them to improve and become a better shooter, right? And the way we do that, obviously, is by making mistakes. So if you're going along in your training and you're making a mistake with something, as long as you are following the basic training cycle of not just continuing to shoot, but to stop, analyze what has happened, try to identify the mistake, then try to come up with some sort of corrective action And then on the next repetition, apply that corrective action, see the results, and if it works, continue. If it doesn't, again, stop and try something else. As long as you're doing that kind of process, everything's going great. The fact that it's not working, is not really the issue. You're going to have those mistakes. Now, what he was probably more talking about, and this is one where you want to take some definite steps, is that you show up for a training session, you have a good plan, you start shooting, and it doesn't seem that no matter what you do, you're just not hacking, right? Things that you've done well in the past before and you've never had an issue with, all of a sudden you're having issues with simple things that you mastered a long time ago. You tend maybe, you don't seem to be focusing, right? Or you're just compounding one problem after another throughout the session. So in that case, there's a couple things you can do. The first, and a lot of this it has to do is how the frequency of your training, right? When I was training full time, I was going to the range and live firing 3 times a week. And so I had lots of opportunities. If I had a bad training session, I didn't worry about it too much. If you can only get to the range twice a month or maybe only once a month, right, with ammo being the way it is or other constraints, things like that, then it gets a little more disconcerting if your 1 or 2 training sessions a month is going well. And so the first thing I would do is, if you're struggling on a drill, is simply stop that drill. I don't care where you are in it, just stop it, put it aside, and move on to something else, another drill, right? You're normally going to probably in most training sessions have 2 or 3 drills during the session. So just simply move on to the next drill, particularly a drill that does not focus on the same kinds of techniques or issues from the previous one, right? I want to do something completely different, move to a different area within your training and your skills and work on that and see if that gets you a mental kickstart and kind of gets you back on track. And if it does, great, move on. Don't think twice about it. Just one of those things, and then complete your training session. Now, if you go to if you try that and you pick your second drill and you seem to be having exactly the same kinds of issues from the previous drill, right? Maybe you're not making the same mistakes because it's a different technique, but the same kind, you're not concentrating, things you knew how to do that you always done well when you were doing these kinds of drills before, you're struggling with. And so you're clearly something's not clicking between your mental and your physical. And so if you try a second drill and the issues continue, what I would do at that point is I would just simply unload and show clear, pack everything up, and go home. I mean, literally just stop training. And that's why I'm saying I know it can be frustrating if you don't get out very often to take the one time you're going and to just quit after 10 or 15 minutes because you're just struggling. But I can tell you, in the long run, you'll be far, far better off by doing that than just, quote, pushing through and continually struggling for the next hour, hour and a half, or however long you plan on shooting and over many rounds you plan on putting down range, right? And part of that is, remember, I talked a lot about the process of how your brain learns tasks, the whole myelination thing. Well, remember, if you spend 2 hours shooting and executing wrong techniques, all those repetitions are going to count against you. And in order to get the technique correct, you got to do 3 times as many correct repetitions, right? So that becomes another serious impediment to efficient, effective training, and it's just not worth it. What I would do in this case, I'd just pack up and go home, and then maybe that night do an extra long dry fire session. Or if you don't normally dry fire on the days where you live fire, go ahead and schedule a dry fire session that night, even 10 or 15 minutes, just something to go off and do. If nothing else, It helps you feel like you can get past this. Well, I feel bad because I didn't do anything today, right? That guilt trip that we kind of give ourselves by, hey, I'm not working hard enough. Well, if you're prone to those kinds of thinking, then just simply go off and do a dry fire session, pick something, and that will help you say, okay, the live fire didn't go well today, but I still trained today. That's good. And so I'm still, working hard and making progress and get through that. Okay. So, those are a couple of simple things that you can do if you find yourself in these kind of situations. Don't make a big deal about it. Now, if it happens every time you go out to shoot, okay, then you've got other things. You need to take a step back and say, why am I constantly struggling and I can't focus and I'm continuing having problems? Maybe your drills are too complex. Maybe you're bringing too much baggage with you, mental baggage with you to the range. It could be lots of reasons why you're struggling when you go shoot. But if that's the case, take a step back, simplify the drills, do simple fundamental things, and try to get yourself back on track. Okay? And the last thing I'll tell you about that is also one technique that always helps that I incorporated many years ago is you should always finish every live fire training session on a strength, something you're good at. Finish off your session doing that skill. It reinforces with your subconscious mind that things are going well, training's going well. Don't underestimate the power of finishing off a session, doing something really well, and finishing really well. Because one of the things that subconscious activity studies have shown is that your subconscious tends to remember and put more weight on the last things you were doing in these repetitive kind of training sessions. And so with that in mind, it's important for you to finish on a strength. Okay, so always finish on a strength, and that should help you as well. All right, I think that will do it for this particular session. Remember, if you are interested in our dry fire training system for Steel Challenge, head on over to our website at steelshootbanners.com. You can see we have all 8 stages in dry fire training banner form. We have over 40 USPSA training banners. We have 15 USPSA classifier stages in banner form. And if you're a Glock competition shooter, we have the 3 official GSSF Glock competition stages all in banner form as well. So you can check them out there. And then lastly, don't forget my books. Do you still feel the need for speed? Do you feel the need for speed? And then on the mental side, mastering the Steel Challenge mental game, the game within the game. Right? Okay, so remember, as always, slowing down is never the right answer. Never. You need to learn to see faster.
Great. Bye.